Hey, my Web3 fellow citizens, welcome back to the Envelop podcast, where we dive into the state of the art in practices and methods that define how Web3 projects are built, grown, and led, and what they do reveal about the current stage of the evolution of the decentralized internet. I'm your host, Eugene, aka Crypto MC, and today I'm sitting the second time with David Dobrovitsky. He's the CEO of wowduck.com. He's the marketing arm of the cicadamarketmaking.com. He also a key opinion leader for Openverse Network, an advisor for FunToken.io, and he's one of the top Web3 LinkedIn influencers. And he collaborates with companies who look to scale their brand growth on LinkedIn. So we agreed to talk about the LinkedIn marketing for Web3 project via influencers. That's a very niche marketing tactic. So if you are a Web3 project, a marketing arm of a Web3 project, and you use links or try or think about using LinkedIn for your marketing, this is episode for you. So Dave, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Well, so needless to say, that's all the links are in the description. You may find David's profile, his Substack, his Twitter. So he's extremely interesting person. But now we are talking just about LinkedIn. David, and my first question of mine, my colleagues, is it's pretty obvious. So LinkedIn, as we know, was originally built as a centralized platform for traditional job searches in space that relies heavily on trust, verified identities, and professional resumes. And yet it seems surprisingly work well in fast-moving Web3 world, which is founded on decentralization, anonymity, and blockchain-based reputation rather than resumes. So sort of contradiction here. How do you explain this phenomena, why LinkedIn works in Web3? I have a hypothesis here, a suspicion that talking about LinkedIn and Web3, we're talking not about the pure Web3 zero, but about a sort of a Web 2.5. Let me coin this term. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn, it's an interesting social media. It was obviously initially developed to be basically like an online resume for people. And, I grew up in the United States. I mean, my initial career was in the States. And in the States, the way people viewed LinkedIn was it's something that you had to enter the corporate world. So that's all that's all there was to it. And in many sectors, it's still treated that way. It's just an online resume. It's something that gives you credibility because I believe that in American culture, especially when you're putting something in a public domain, that gives you a lot more kind of clout, if you will, transparency. People can trust you. That culture is based on that. And so LinkedIn worked very well with that. The reason it has grown into like an engine for marketing for Web3 recently is because, first of all, we had such a horrible bear market from around 2022 to 2025. So much of the old crypto got wiped out in that. And what replaced it was institutional startups, institutional companies that are related to banking, companies that are related to fintech. And obviously that creates a completely different culture. And so that starts to permeate Web3. And that's why you get so much activity on LinkedIn. The people that were left over and survived the bear market from the original Web3 started to also shift towards institutional and corporate. The other kind of major thing that happened was that X started to become much less effective as a social media. And the reason that happened is because X has been owned by at least three different entities in terms of, and by owned, I mean led. The algorithm changed and shifted from what it originally was. Originally, X was the biggest social media in Web3, and it was the one that you kind of centralized all of your marketing from. But because the organic reach in X started to lessen, and because X is so heavily now geared towards somebody being extremely famous and bringing all of that fame to X rather than becoming famous from X, it creates the situation where smaller companies are having a harder time reaching organic public. Meanwhile, in LinkedIn, the organic reach is still fairly good, actually. And if you have thought leadership content, if you put out thought leadership rather than pure advertisement, which is because, X was pure promotion, literally pure promotion. And LinkedIn was always about if you deviated from the strict online resume scheme, then it was thought leadership. And so to this day, if you create content that is more in line with education and thought leadership on LinkedIn, there's a lot of organic reach. The algorithm is going to push what you put out, and so there that creates some real potential for headwind for smaller companies. The interesting thing about all of this is that with LinkedIn, I find that you have to be completely doxxed. And completely public as an individual contributor to get the algorithm to trust your content. If you put out the content as a company, then the algorithm automatically also kind of closes the net and doesn't allow the content to permeate as much. So it has to be totally transparent, totally doxed, totally corporate world and thought leadership education, and then you get the organic reach.
Also talking about LinkedIn, the first thesis is that LinkedIn works Web3 as well. And the second thesis that I got for you is it requires totally transparent personality. So the sort is called personal brand. So if the concept of personal branding resonates with you, if you don't afraid to show your face, and you are in Web3, and as we with David, I am in Web3 with Open Face and David in Web3. So we are all both LinkedIn influencers, we may call us so. So LinkedIn is place for you, for you. What should a project, Web3 project know? The main difference of LinkedIn, so we pointed out, but nonetheless, let's resume. Well, once again, the main difference of LinkedIn as a marketing channel from other great marketing channels for Web3. You mentioned X, probably, I don't know, Instagram, Facebook, so whatever you mean. The main difference, let's say.
Well, LinkedIn is for thought leadership. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. It's thought leadership and educational content, basically. You should diminish token promotion, obviously. There's a great liability in putting out token information there. You should diminish any kind of schmaltz, if I may call it that. Anything that's not educational and thought leadership and to the point. It's like the French like to say à point. Has to be to the point. And X is all about the promotion, really crazy promotion as much as possible. Instagram is obviously all visual content and has to be very good quality visual content and specifically small videos. Instagram is all about reels now, right? There's also all of these different social media channels. The algorithms are all like different things, and the cultures are completely different. Like TikTok, for example, is like great virality, but the videos don't have to be as well put together in Instagram, but they also don't last as long because a TikTok video you can get 20 million people looking at it, but it will be gone in 2 weeks. Nobody will know where the link for that video is. So all of these social media now, they have a very, very, you know, distinct algorithmic likes and features, and they were built for very different purposes, and you have to know how to play with them and interact with them, basically.
Well, so talking about the role of influencer in Web3 space, connection with LinkedIn channel. How can such a person help a project, Web3 project, stand out in this crowded landscape of blockchain and crypto initiatives? And what, from your experience, should a Web3 project expect from a behavior of an influencer in LinkedIn? What this person will be typically doing and what he will reject at all doing at all. So
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn influencers, you could also call them brand ambassadors. They are there to expand your brand. That's all. And ideally speaking, you want the person to make you look respectable, to connect you to big connections, VCs, journalists, PR, it's a growth engine for how everybody positively looks at your brand. That's what it is. The LinkedIn influencer or ambassador, brand ambassador, whatever you want to call it, or the thought leader that works with your company. It's all about legitimizing you as a company. Um, the person, and inevitably, because you're doxxed, you're basically saying, here's my reputation. I'm going to put my reputation next to this company because I know that this company is legitimate. And so it's extremely valuable if you're trying to become institutional, if you're trying to grow as a company, as a legitimate business. What a thought leader can't do on LinkedIn is sell tokens. So if you're looking for KOLs that sell tokens, then that needs to happen either on X or on Telegram, and ultimately that's different types of influencers that you will need to get into your team or that you hire out for a marketing campaign. But with LinkedIn, it's always about legitimizing a company.
Well, so from what you said, I am making a conclusion that if we have a brand ambassador, first we must deal with as a brand of a company. If a company doesn't have a brand, so the strategy
Yeah,
of using
it's
influencer is
true.
not allowed. First, what should we know about the brand, the power of brand? So brand may be very new, and nobody knows that a brand may be very, very known, so it needs not influencer. So what's the scale of brand powerfulness, I would say, and the influencer power, how to balance this power of the brand of a company and a brand of influencer? That's a question.
When you look at the biggest companies, specifically ones that came out of the United States, because Americans do this extremely well, companies like Cardano, well, I mean, it's multiple companies, obviously, it's not one, or it's an organization. But you have the leader in the Cardano, you have the person, the people leading Ripple, for example. These are faces you instantly recognize, and you recognize them almost from the very beginning, you know? Even USDT has the CTO, I believe, who acts as kind of like the visible presence for all of their announcements. So companies, legitimate like companies, big companies with revenue, and even companies that just start out that want to be immediately thought of as kind of higher above board companies, institutional level. You know what I mean? They all have a face that is recognizable, and you need that. You can't really grow a following if you don't have somebody personable representing the company. It's very hard to do that. There are some brands that succeeded in doing that. For example, in America, you have the store that everybody loves, Trader Joe's, right? And they have absolutely no visible presence. But then again, you're talking about a multi-million dollar, billion dollar company that can spend gazillions of dollars on marketing. But specifically, if we're talking about this, the same thing with Binance. Binance did this with CZ, visible presence, always there. I think that this tradition of having a real kind of a brand ambassador is something that really came out of North America and Canada, America. It's a little bit present in the UK as well. There's an overlap on culture there. But the further east you go, the less you see it, in my opinion. You do see it, for example, with Justin Sun and the Tron network. Um, but the most successful and the most recognizable faces usually are all from North America. So to answer your question, one doesn't hinder the other. You could have a company that is known for, one, two, three, four, five things that it does, and then you can have a brand ambassador that legitimizes the company and is the face and somebody that you can trust, and that establishes the trust for the end user to the company because there's a personable interaction. And it's just another way of doing marketing and growing a brand, basically.
Well, let me ask you the specific question. Does all you said previously mean that because every company has its own founder or CEO, which is also a person, and probably has a personal brand, to have a founder and CEO as a brand ambassador of its own brand is a bad strategy in LinkedIn. Better to hire an independent influencer, which has credibility and reputation, which is not related to company in any other role than just an influencer. So independent influencer and great brand. This is the perfect strategy on LinkedIn for Web3 project. Am I getting it right?
Well, it depends on the company. For example, I work for a company where the company was completely kind of moved forward by board of directors. They wanted somebody who's a public face. I, as a CEO, was the public face. Um, and there are other sometimes the CEOs are not public, public speaking averse, let's say. Maybe they don't have the personality to be visible. And in that case, you do need somebody else. It could be like you hire a CMO and they do it, or you can even just get a brand ambassador, and the brand ambassador basically becomes this major visual center for the company. But it all depends. I think it works really well when it's a CEO. Actually, you know who does this extremely well is Durov with Telegram. Does extremely well. Um, But it doesn't have to be the CEO. As long as it's somebody who people learn to trust, ideally somebody who has credibility beyond just the company, the company shouldn't make the brand ambassador. Brand ambassador should already be important. The brand ambassador then puts their reputation next to the company and lifts that company up and helps it grow. So as long as that happens, it could be anybody. But in many cases, like for example with Telegram, you have the CEO who's extremely visible, does an extremely great job, and that's kind of how people associate the company.
Well, could you please help us understand the difference between a sort of synonyms? Probably. The first name is ambassador of the company, the second name is influencer, and the third name is KOL, key opinion leader. What is the difference between the three names? Are they synonyms or they differ?
I'll start from the last. So KOL is an Asian term. It's a Chinese cultural term. It was appropriated by crypto. And in my opinion, based on my knowledge, and again, I don't want to say that I have a deep knowledge of Chinese culture because I don't necessarily, even though I've visited Asia. But basically, it's these are streamers. They stream and they talk about different products and stuff like that. It has to do with Asian culture, basically. And is it the same as an influencer? Sort of, maybe not completely. And an influencer is somebody from the West, from like Western media, alternative media, that has deep knowledge on a subject and usually some sort of community and followers, super fans, who can talk about the subject and bring those super fans into that subject. Whether it's crypto, whether it's popcorn, whether it's dogs, doesn't matter. They have the audience and they bring that audience into whatever they want. And in many ways, KOL is the same thing. Again, it's like an Asian direction there. Um, when we're talking about a brand ambassador, we're talking about more corporate, uh, and we're also talking about somebody that represents company brand. This doesn't necessarily have to be an influencer. It could be somebody important within the business. It could be an important innovator. It could be an important CEO that brings their reputation and connects it to the company. So it doesn't have to be an immediate influencer, at least not from the point of view of creating content. Let me also kind of go back and say that both KOLs and influencers are content creators at their core. You have to create content and you have to do it constantly and you have to grow your audience. With a brand ambassador, you don't have to create content, not in the alternative media sense at least, but you have to be important and your reputation, if you bring it into the orbit of the company that you're a brand ambassador of, has to lift up that company.
Well, Gary, one of the things that worries me a lot is that one of the core principles in Web3, almost a mantra, if I would say, is DYOR, do your own research, which means every user must research a project himself. Does not the very idea of an influencer, which implies that a person, this non-person, has done its own research, conflict with that principle, since their role often implies that they already done the research and the audience should simply trust, believe the judgment of an influencer? What are your thoughts on that potential conflict of interests?
Look, I think that part of the ethos of DeFi specifically is that you have to research your own investment opportunities and you have to make up your own mind. Um, part of what DeFi brought to the table was, all of the processes of what happens internally with capital that banks do to basically make themselves money became a public facing end user product. In that scenario, you have to do your own research. You have to try to understand what you're doing. And you can't just rely on somebody talking at you from a YouTube video to basically make up your mind. That doesn't work. It doesn't work in life either. You can't have somebody thinking for you. So I agree with that statement. I agree that it's used in Web3 to peddle really bad content that is completely promotional and then limit the liability. And in that, I do see a problem. But the overall ethos of it is good. It is right. It's your responsibility as an adult to make up your mind, get yourself the education, learn how to do it, and then do it. You know? So I see your point. I agree to some extent. But on the other hand, uh, that's how DeFi was created. With people that, some at some point, somebody who knew how to code and understood banking combined those two things and created, Uniswap and other things, and that's how DeFi started. And so it fits well within the ethos. Now, in terms of influencing, educated public knows that there's a very little difference between advertisement and propaganda, right? It's all very, very connected. And these are just different degrees. Sales, advertisement, propaganda. All, if you look at it from a historical context, they were all developed by one person. And they're all different shades of the same thing. If you understand that and you're educated as a viewer, then you can make discretionate choices of what you're doing. But if you go into the YouTube video and you say, that nice man out there wants me to be a millionaire, well, yeah, it's going to be a problem. So I think it's a matter of education, ownership, discretion, taking ownership of your life, making your own choices. And so I think that, no, I think it's just our reality. And then people need to understand that that's what reality is.
Well, it's a good answer.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so we have a LinkedIn as a marketing channel. We have a Web3 project with probably good brand, with not bad reputation, and we have a person which is independent, active, creates content, has built a trust. So what is these are, I have named the components of marketing strategy on LinkedIn. What would be the best strategy of a Web3 project with a brand to find an influencer and to work? How do you envision it? What will be your recommendations?
Well, you have to find somebody whose ethos complements yours. So if you're as a company are trying to, let's say as an example, bring crypto to the masses and make it into a consumer friendly product to people who don't necessarily know how to use it, then you have to find a brand ambassador or influencer who speaks about the same things, and preferably connect the two brands, and that's effective. So it's always about working with people that speak to your ethos, speak to your what you're trying to accomplish, connecting it, and then if those people have a good enough reach as influencers, then what they will bring to the table is they will enlarge your reputation, lift up your reputation, give you a boost, and legitimize you. And also, of course, open doors in their professional network and their followers. So I think that's how to effectively do it.
Well, so you repeated the word ethos, ethics. So it means that his goals and your goals for project should be aligned. They should not contradict.
Correct.
So if you're a scammer, if your goal is to make a fraud with people, you're not allowed to find an influencer which is honest, stays for a long time, has a low time preference. So you probably won't be working together. It's very
Well,
easy to understand.
hopefully. I mean, mistakes do happen, and honestly, when that kind of mistake happens, it's disastrous for the influencer because but it does happen. I mean, sometimes people do end up accidentally working with somebody who is a scam. But look, at the end of the day, Web3 is still a wild sector. I was recently asked in an interview, like, how should you act in Web3? The reality is Web3 does not still, even though we have institutional adoption, it still does not have a system. The reason it doesn't have a system is because it's extremely global, right? And so you still have to trust your instincts and you still have to work from kind of like making the right decisions on the spot. It's still there, even though all of our capital is now going into integrating with fintech and banking.
Well, let's take your personal example. You as influencer, how do you choose projects to work with from their ads? What kind of projects would you rather work with, and what kind of projects you strictly won't be working with?
I usually work with projects that are either they are recommended to me by VCs, and I know the faces of the people that recommend them. That gives me some level of comfort knowing that I'm working with people that are public enough that they have something to lose, which means that I can put my name next to it and they won't, I won't necessarily get burned by making a bad decision. I try not to work with small projects, generally speaking, but if it is a small project, I need to know exactly where the founders are, who they are, and I need to have a real history. And I need to see their LinkedIn. I need to see how long they've been there, that they build up something. Um, so that's how I choose. I do prefer to work with projects that have a better products, but I don't think I've ever really worked with projects that have absolutely horrible products. But the main thing is I need to be able to verify people, like who is it, what is their what where is this person from? Have they done? Do they invest in projects? Do they have something to lose? Like if I can verify them and I can see that they're building something, then that gives me more or less a comfort in working with them, if that makes sense.
Is there any risk of good Web3 project owners, Web3 project who stays for a long time to find a wrong influencer, I would say, or in other words, is there any red flags for a project connected with influencer when selecting an influencer? What would you recommend to how to select influencer from different influencers if a project has a choice?
So first of all, I would say you have to see what the reach is on LinkedIn. When you look at LinkedIn and if you have somebody who makes posts, if their posts are at least 10 likes and over, you're dealing with somebody who has very good reach. Also reposts. If it's less, then that's not an influencer. That's maybe a decent profile. If you're getting 10 likes and over, you're usually going to get a reach of at least 1,000 to 11,000 views, which is very good. It's micro influencing, and in micro influencing is very valuable in very niche tech, kind of subjects, because that means that person has their own niche group of people that follow that person, and you can reach them. And so you have to look at the metrics, and it's great to ask for what's the amount of viewership per post. Can you give me a screenshot? So if the screenshot shows, so just so that we're all on the same page, with LinkedIn, when you're not an influencer, but you have a decent post, you get around 100 to 500 views. That's what LinkedIn is good for if you're not an influencer. So if you're getting, let's say, 1,000 and above, that's usually a micro influencer. And obviously, it also depends on the following. But if you have around, in terms of following, anything less than, or followers, anything less than 10,000 followers is not an influencer. So you need to also look at the followers. It has to be 10,000 or above. So all of these numbers and metrics, they give you a good idea of the reach and the respectability of the person. You can also go to ChatGPT, put the person's name in. ChatGPT immediately gives you full analysis of the person's online presence, and we can also give you some idea of the reach. You can even ask it directly, like, is the person an influencer? What kind of influencer? Can you look at, then you can compile the numbers, and you can see the overall picture of the person. And the other thing is you need to look at the posts of the person. I see some people right now, they've recently joined from Web3, they joined LinkedIn, and they end up doing the same kind of content that they do in X. Like it's ridiculous. They go and they're like, look at this token, and and then they show a chart. I mean, come on, like it's LinkedIn, you know what I mean? It's a completely different social media, but the mentality is the same. And Honestly, they don't understand it, but it looks unbelievably cringe. Like just cringe. And any professional network that will look at it on LinkedIn will be like, who the heck is this? Why are we looking at this weirdo content that should be in some X? So you look at what the posts are. Just because a person is, very big in crypto in 2020 or 2021 or 2020, and they had some tweets that everybody liked, maybe they show some tokens, or maybe they even say that they exited or whatever. It doesn't mean that it's appropriate content for LinkedIn. It has to be, LinkedIn is thought leadership. That's what it is. It's literally just that. It's nothing else. Anything else showing, how tokens go up and down via charts is borderline unprofessional. There is a code of conduct, there is an etiquette. Okay? So you can do this kind of stuff in X, but it's preferable not to do it on LinkedIn because that content is out of place. So you have to look at the discretion of the person, at the posts, and what they do. If they provide thought leadership on LinkedIn, then that's quality content. Then you need to look at the metrics, and the metrics will tell you if that's a real influencer on LinkedIn and if they can help you. But if the metrics are too small, then they can't. But then you need to also think about a different metric because sometimes the social media may not be huge, but the value of the person's reputation in general is big. That's another thing to analyze. And you can analyze this by yourself, or you can ask ChatGPT to do the analysis. It's extremely effective at doing all of that.
Well, so dear scammers and scam token sellers, you have probably understood that LinkedIn strategy via influencers is not your way of doing, and quite the opposite. If your project, if you are a founder with a strong ethics principles, you stay for a long time, probably founding an honest influencer with low time preference. LinkedIn is one of the best strategy you may find on this marketing landscape, and this episode explains you how, why it fits to you. So, David, can you provide examples from your experience how an influencer campaign LinkedIn helped a Web3 project successfully drive user acquisition, promote a brand, or even foster strategic partnerships with investors?
Well, I haven't made studies on that, so I don't have anything off the top of my head. I can tell you that from with one of my employers, and again, I'll bring myself as an example. When I joined their company, their token went up a certain amount of percentage that week. I didn't do anything specifically to do it. I didn't shield the token. All I did was I simply said, I'm now an employee of that company. Token goes up. Obviously, market was also favorable, so it was favorable that it went up. But all in all, it helped. It was a real bump in the chart. At the same time, I started to give interviews, and everything centered around my LinkedIn, what I've done in the past. And, for example, at one time I had a space for that project that I was a CEO of, where there was like 900,000 people in a space, basically. So you can imagine 900,000 people is a capital of a country. You know what I mean? So uh, I did not sell the token. I never mentioned the token. I didn't say buy it, you know, but because I had a very good reputation and a very good media personality, and they could look at my LinkedIn as the anchor for the background of who I am. I revived the community, and it was very, very successful. So that's one example of how that works. Um, you can have a dormant community, but if you bring in a person that has real respectability, a real weight, all of a sudden you have 200,000 people in the space, 600,000 people in the space. I mean, again, imagine I used to live in Tirana, Albania. There's 900,000 people in Tirana, and in one space I had 900,000 people. So
Mm.
it's a big thing. It's a very big thing, and it revitalizes the enthusiasm for the project without necessarily hurting anybody's reputation. Because regardless of what we want to think, when we use token seller influencers or KOLs, we may get a bump in the buy pressure, you know, but at the end of the day, somewhere someone is always going to be able to find that you use these influencers to basically do that bump. And it never fully looks organic. And that does leave some kind of a trace, let's say. When you're reviving the community through a thought leader, nobody will ever get hurt. You will expand your reputation as a business. You will have the connection to that person, but you will grow as a business, not a speculative asset. And that is a huge upgrade, if you will, because as a speculative asset, there's always somebody that's going to frown at you. But as a business, pure business growth, nobody will ever frown at that, and your reputation will always grow. So that's the real difference.
Well, speaking about ROI of a marketing campaign, how can a Web3 project measure an ROI with working with influencers on LinkedIn compared to other platforms? What are KPIs, marketing metrics to track when collaborating with an influencer on LinkedIn?
Well, first of all, you have to look at the numbers, right? So if a person puts out a post, how many views did he get? How many likes? How many comments? I mean, that's the most basic thing. And it shows you at least the reach. That's number one. Number two, brand ambassadors and influencers on LinkedIn create an effect that piles up. Meaning, like, it's not like a token seller KOL. Token seller KOL puts out a tweet about how you should buy this or that token when the market is green, and then the token goes up, and for a little bit you get this bump in buy pressure. An influencer on LinkedIn needs to do multiple posts, make it look organic, and then over time, with 2, 3, 6 months, you get the effect. The effect is much greater visibility, which leads to invitations to conferences to speak, which leads to foundations being interested, for example, in giving you grants, which leads to clients that the person can bring in. So it's a difference between doing traditional, highly solid business and being a speculative asset. Again, in our industry, we have a young industry, and we have an industry that's to a large extent still is based on speculation. And in speculation, people want a profit right away, especially in it with a technology that allows you to do instant loans in one click on a blockchain. Everybody wants something instant in one transaction. But that in the traditional business, that's not how it works. Okay, you bring in people that give weight, respectability, influence, network, and as we call it, network effect. The people that have a network effect as well. And these people, when they come on board, they give an impact that's cumulative, which means if they're there for 6 months, you're going to see an opening with a lot more clients, with a lot more respectability. One of the projects where I was a fractional CMO, but where people knew that I put my weight behind the project, right after I joined the project for a month, they all got invited to a conference to be speakers. Before I came, nobody knew about them, and nobody really cared, honestly. After I came on board, they got a invitation to list on a major exchange. Before I came on board, everybody thought it was a failed project. So this is just an example, but this is how it works. It's cumulative, and it's much more in line with traditional business growth rather than speculative growth, if that makes sense.
So we probably came to the end of our episode. So we've learned the basic principles of how to use this practice of using influencer on LinkedIn. Finally, Dave, let me ask you two questions about big frees. The first frees are, what are free biggest mistakes which a Web3 project can make when choosing a LinkedIn influencer in this strategy? Let's prevent them from making this mistake.
Okay, number one, picking a person whose messaging and content does not go in line with your brand, number one, because it's unrealistic to expect a content creator to just change their messaging for your business. You need to find a content creator whose message already aligns with your business, number one. Number two, not checking the metrics of the reach of the post and not knowing exactly what you want and not understanding how niche followings work. So very often we have people, when they're very inexperienced, they try to find influencers that have like 1 million people on their X or like 1 million people on their LinkedIn, and they think that if that's who they find, that they will be successful, and that's not how it works. For example, even on X, you could have a person who has 3,000 followers, but if you look at the viewership of every tweet, If they have at least 1,000 to 2,000 people looking at their tweet, that's a major influencer. Just it's called a micro influencer. And micro influencers are very valuable when dealing with niche publics. So specifically like technology, very niche topics. And so, it works the same with LinkedIn. If, for example, I'll give you an example. I have 14,000 around 600, so 14,600 followers on LinkedIn. Okay, that's not necessarily the biggest following, but one of my posts recently did 11,000 views, which means that my post reached 75% or above of my total followers. Plus, you look at the metrics, I got maybe like 100 likes, 50, 55, 60 comments. That's a niche audience. Okay. But very often you have people who try to choose influencers. They don't understand subtleties. It's all very subtle. You have to understand the actual mechanics of how it works. So that's another thing. Not understanding how niche topics work and how influencing actually works. And the third thing is picking somebody whose content doesn't match LinkedIn culture. It shouldn't be somebody who constantly posts like trading graphs, basically. Like it's not, it's not within the culture of the social media. It's just not. It's like going to a fine French restaurant and being dressed in shorts. It's like it doesn't work. So the person who makes the content, you have discretion. Where are you? How are you dressed? Does it match the occasion? Does it work? And you have to be very careful about that because when you're connecting on LinkedIn, it's all about looking good, looking legitimate. Obviously, you're not going to look legitimate if the person who works with you that doesn't make legitimate content on the platform. So it's all about that kind of very strong discretion of making the right choices, if that makes sense.
Well, so we've learned mistakes and three main recommendations, advices from you to a Web3 project founder or CMO who probably looks for LinkedIn strategy, probably thinks about influencer, what he or she should have done after listening to this episode to launch the LinkedIn influencement strategy on LinkedIn via influencer.
Check the content. Make sure that the content aligns with LinkedIn culture. Check the content. Make sure that the content aligns with your brand. And check and ask for metrics. Ask for a screenshot of a recent post. Check the viewership. Check the likes, the retweets. Compare that to their followers to try to understand how much percentage of the actual followers they're reaching with their content. And if you don't understand the numbers, put it into ChatGPT and ask directly. It's a very simple prompt. John Smith has 16,000 followers on LinkedIn, and he put out a post, and he got this many likes and this many reposts, and this many comments. Analyze John Smith's online presence, and in lieu of the post, what kind of influencer is John Smith? Is John Smith a real influencer? And what kind of size? Micro, macro? What? There's like four different levels of influencer, and ChatGPT will give you a full audit of John Smith, and you'll be able to figure out, what type of thing. And you can also ask other questions like, is John Smith a person who's trusted in Web3? It will pull all the data, and that will give you. And I've done it, by the way. I use ChatGPT for content. I use it for editing. I use it for research. I use it for research on companies, and it's extremely good as it's almost like having a very good researcher that you work with. And they will give you all the content, and beyond that content, you can go to your CMO, you can go to others, and show that data, discuss it, and then make a decision. So right now it's easier than ever to make these types of decisions because we have the software to now analyze everything in a way where it's all actual and real in real time.
Well, David, am I making the correct conclusion from all that you've said that a real influencer will not be messaging to a founder or to CMO of project and saying, hey, I'm an influencer, let's work together, see my posts, see my likes, I'm a great person. So he won't be selling himself. It is expected that a project must find an influencer and not vice versa.
I'm not sure I agree with that actually, because you have to understand culture is different. Like, for example, I know for a fact that in Eastern Europe and other places, it's not considered okay to sell aggressively. But think about it in American culture, it's absolutely okay. I get messages from um, job coaches and from various influencers in different fields that tell me, "Hey, David, how are you? How's you?" It's within a certain culture. For example, if you are in again, like give you an example, if you are in France or even Germany, you may not necessarily get that message. Maybe in Germany sometimes. But if you're in America, those messages will come all the time, and they will also come very often from fairly established people. There's a difference between being an influencer and selling, you know? And also, don't forget that influencers sell in subtle ways. They organize webinars, they organize groups, they give free content. All of that is sales in the end, because we're all pulling people to ourselves through our content. And it's not just writing content in a vacuum. So to make it kind of to wrap it up in a way is it's different cultures. I try not to judge the different cultures because yes, sometimes people do direct approach with sales as long as they're kind of being respectful. They're not being annoying about it. Um, then I don't see a problem. It's when people start to push very hard. I don't agree with pushing hard in sales because I feel like either there's a connection, you make the connection and you can start to sell, or if there's not a connection, why are you beating the person with a stick? Doesn't make any sense. Nobody's going to leave happy after that. So I think that as long as it's sales done again with discretion and etiquette, and as long as it's just like the influencing, I don't see any problem with it.
Well, now it looks pretty clear about all the stuff. And finally, David, I must ask you, I don't know how busy is your business schedule now, but are you looking now for a partnership with a great Web3 project which has a strong brand and needs to promote to increase his brand growth on LinkedIn? And if yes, what are your main requirements for this project? Call to
Well,
action time.
as you know, right now I'm the CEO of WowDoc.com, which is the marketing arm of Cicada. So very much I'm kind of working with Cicada to bring uh, projects into the orbit of Cicada to a large extent. I'm always open for partnerships with interesting projects, especially ones that can benefit my employer and my network. And so, yeah, with Cicada, by the way, if your viewers, they can go to cicada-mm.com and you can also check out wowdoc.com. But yes, to kind of summarize, I'm very open to partnerships, to bring partnerships into the orbit of organizations that I work with, especially if it's quality projects.
Okay, is there anything we must add in the end of our episode which we didn't say before?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just want to say that like LinkedIn is a great marketing source. It's specifically great because of the organic reach that you can have there. It is one of the newer channels that we have starting to be recognized because of the institutional adoption of Web3, and it needs to be approached with a different sensibility than X. But ultimately, it's a great sensibility, and it allows for businesses to grow as businesses rather than just speculative assets. So I think that that's a great new change in the industry, and I think it's something worth looking into.
Definitely. That's it for today's episode of the Envelop podcast, where we explore the state of the art in Web3 practices and methods and try to understand the evolution of the centralized internet. We've been exploring LinkedIn, brand growth of Web3. I'm Eugene Crypto MC from Envelop, and I was sitting with David Dobrovitsky. You may find all the links to David's profiles and projects in the description. So until next episode, guys, keep building, keep learning, and keep shaping the future of Web3. Bye-bye. Blockchain. BLOCK chain. Digital money, smart contracts, NFT, IDO, decentralization, transparency. So many opportunities, but so many challenges. Some financial manipulators, by their actions, confuse blockchain solutions and block their development. The idea that the blockchain should bring copyright and royalties protection to the next level is quite old, but the realizations of these ideas are not perfect at all. There is another problem of determining the value of a particular cryptocurrency or NFT. These and other problems need to be solved. Fortunately, the blockchain infrastructure is evolving. My name is E, Mr. E, and I represent the Envelop project. Many things have already been invented in the blockchain today. Tokens, smart contracts, platforms for creating your own coins, NFTs, exchanges for buying, selling, and exchanging all these blockchain resources. Envelop is another step in the development of crypto technologies. The protocol that works with NFT and cryptocurrencies. The idea is simple but disruptive. Let's assume you have an NFT, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Using the Envelop protocol, you can wrap the original NFT accompanied with several tokens. Technically, you get a similar NFT, but what is the breakthrough here? Once wrapped, the token has a number of additional features that were not available before. The minimal cost appears. It is provided with coins wrapped together with NFT. An asset wrapped with Envelop has a number of properties that allow the original author to receive royalties from the resale of that asset. Various rules can be applied to the wrapped token. For example, a lock period for unwrapping. It secures the asset till the determined moment or safeguards it from speculation during the hype period. At the same time, wrapped tokens can be transferred and traded. These are just some of the scenarios for using Envelop. NFTs become more popular, and the tools provided by Envelop expand the opportunities of NFTs utilization. Wide application possibilities are achieved due to the fact that, in addition to the protocol, the project includes a number of subsystems. The protocol provides functions wrapping and unwrapping. Oracle mechanics provides asset valuation using analytical algorithms. Index provides a summary assessment of several NFT assets with the common criteria. The project has its own token, which connects all elements of the system. Altogether, this is Envelop, a tool in the blockchain world for building modern and secure systems in various fields. Find more info about the project on the website. Envelop. Make your NFT valuable. Just practical, no hype.